Many thanks to my supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to join them, check the link in the description. But now, enjoy the video. Whenever anyone mentions the PlayStation 3 era of Gran Turismo, there are always a number of things that spring to mind. Lackluster career modes, questionable performance, and of course, the infamous standard car models. Each of them paint a fairly negative picture of both Gran Turismo 5 and 6, but there were also many good points. Full online play, improved customization, a damage model, interior view, and even more. There were plenty of new and interesting ideas that were brought to the series during this time. But if I were to point to one specific feature that really summed up the state of the franchise during this period, it would have to be the special events. Special events were carefully crafted challenges that required drivers to do more than simply winning races. Or at least that's how they're described in the GT6 online manual. The truth is that the term special event had been used in the series already, mostly during the PS1 era. However, in those games, they just referred to a subsection of race events that were still part of the regular career mode. In GT5 and 6, special events are divorced entirely from the main campaign, existing purely as optional side activities. You can think of them as like the mission events that debuted in GT4, but with more variety and stronger theming. But much like many other things in the PS3 era, the quality of each special event varied a fair amount. In most cases, these challenges pull from real-life ideas to varying degrees, each trying to achieve something slightly different. This makes the task of ranking each of them very subjective, but there are some clear points of judgment. Beyond the obvious one of how much do I enjoy it, I'll also be considering what sort of experience each special event tries to offer and how well they pull it off. There will also be points applied for originality. If you watch my video ranking each of the GT original circuits, then you'll know the drill. This is my list based on my opinion and not anyone else's. Alright, with all of that out of the way, this is every special event in Gran Turismo ranked. Let's do this. Coming in last, we have the Top Gear Test Track special event from Gran Turismo 5. Now what really cements it at the bottom of the pile for me is how clearly it paints the fact that Polyphony really had no idea what to do with their Top Gear license. Beyond a neat intro cinematic featuring the Stig, there really isn't anything that ties this event to the show, other than the track itself of course. Like most special events in GT5, it takes the form of 3 difficulty levels that unlock based on your A-spec driver level. The events themselves are fairly standard one-make races, the first with the painfully slow Volkswagen Samba bus, and the second with the tail-happy Lotus Elise 111R. Really, only the third race offers anything remotely unique. In this case, you're once again thrown into a one-make race, but now with the lethargic Volkswagen Kübelwagen. However, at the same time, there's a handful of Schwimmwagens that start half a lap behind. As the track crosses over itself, this means that you're always at risk of colliding with them, which happens to the AI without fail. It is somewhat amusing, but still kind of lame. I've always found it quite ironic that, despite all of the shenanigans that have taken place on Top Gear, the fact that the track has a crossover isn't something they really ever made use of. And yet, when it came to Gran Turismo, this was the one gimmick they latched onto with this special event. Weird. None of the races themselves are particularly hard, the only thing you really need to watch out for are the cones that line the side of the track. Despite the AI regularly cleaning them out, if you touch one yourself, it's instantly game over. And that's pretty much all there is to it. I think it's safe to say that, when it came to Top Gear, Forza Motorsport 4 had the better integration. It still didn't do a whole lot with the track, but it was at least more interesting than just some basic races. It also featured cars like the Suzuki Liana and Kia Ceed that appeared in the show's reasonably priced car segments. In GT5, although the track served as a popular place to mess around in online lobbies, its use in the single player was extremely limited. This special event was really their one big chance to do something interesting, and they completely squandered it. I guess the best way I can describe it is that, with this special event, they weren't ambitious, but still kinda rubbish. Our next entry really couldn't be much different. Here we have the Lunar Exploration from Gran Turismo 6. This special event essentially recreates NASA's Apollo 15 mission, which was the first time a vehicle was ever driven on the surface of the moon. And that vehicle in question was the Lunar Roving Vehicle 001. This special event very much feels like a case of we did it because we could. Literally nobody was asking for this in Gran Turismo, but Polyphony made it anyway. It's honestly kind of amazing to think that this actually exists. I mean, could you imagine any other major racing game franchise trying this? It's just so on brand for Gran Turismo. In some ways, I really respect them for making it. It has to be said that they did an impressive job. How they modeled the surface of the moon, the way the buggy drives with the reduced gravity, and the whole atmosphere of the mission makes it feel very immersive. But don't confuse my respect for enjoyment. There is a reason why I've ranked it so low after all. For me, the novelty of this event wears off pretty quickly, usually after about a minute. Unfortunately, the event itself lasts a fair bit longer than that. It takes the form of 3 individual missions, the first 2 being simple point A to point B time trials. Once the initial wonder of this event wears off, you quickly realise that all you're doing is driving a very slow vehicle across rough terrain with a deeply frustrating physics model. Authentic or not, this simply isn't fun. And I guess Polyphony themselves realised this to some degree, which leads us to the third and final mission. In this one, you're tasked with knocking over 30 cones arranged in one big oval. Yes, the Mad Lads really did it, a coffee break on the moon. I'm not sure whether to laugh or cry, maybe both at the same time. In case you're wondering, I have golded all 3 of these missions on a previous save, but such is my level of disinterest that I simply could not be bothered to do it again. So to summarise, the Lunar Exploration is a special event that I appreciate Polyphony for having the audacity to create, but at the same time, equally respect them for never bringing back. Here we have the Sebastian Loeb Rally Challenge. Now, whilst I had plenty to say about our first 2 entries, there really isn't much to talk about with this one. This special event is simply a set of 3 time trials across the 3 non-tarmac circuits in GT5. Given that none of these tracks appear in any of the standard career mode races, this marks one of the few instances where you actually have to drive on them in the single player. Of course, the event itself is themed around Sebastian Loeb, the 9-time World Rally Champion, albeit only a 7-time champion when the game released. As such, you get to drive his 2008 Citroen C4 WRC for the event, and can even win it by achieving all golds. One strange quirk in this game can be seen very obviously in the event at Chamonix. For whatever reason, skid recovery force gives you insanely more grip on snow, to the point where having it turned off makes this event near impossible, but when switching it on, it becomes a cakewalk. I'm not really sure how they managed to screw up the balance this much. And as far as interesting things to say about this special event go, that's pretty much it. Its ranking here is more of a reflection on its creativity, or rather, lack thereof. It's perfectly fine, there's nothing really wrong with it, but also nothing that exciting about it either. Thankfully, when it comes to GT5 special events involving rally, there is another one that I find far more interesting. Stay tuned for that. Next up, we come to possibly the most infamous special event of all. This is the Sebastian Vettel X Challenge from GT5. The format of this event is much the same as the Sebastian Loeb Rally Challenge, 3 events at different circuits in which you have to beat target times whilst following a ghost car. The difference with this event, however, is that you have to complete 2 laps at each circuit, an outlap and a fast lap, with both being timed as 1. The other major difference is the car itself. The Red Bull X2010. This is a car dreamt up by legendary Formula 1 designer Adrian Newey that aimed to push the boundaries by being the fastest racing car that would be theoretically possible to create. It utilises fan car technology to essentially suck itself to the ground and produce as much downforce as its body allows. Now that's all well and good, but what this means is that to get the most out of this car requires an incredible amount of precision, a level of precision that most people simply don't have. Unfortunately, the target times for this event are really strict, making this one of, if not the toughest event in Gran Turismo history. The problem is that because you're going so fast, any slight hesitation or misinput will have catastrophic consequences. On a standard DualShock controller, it's almost impossible to get gold, since as the game automatically smooths out your inputs, this creates a slight steering delay, which is normally not very noticeable, but with a car this fast, it can be crippling. To be honest, even with a wheel, these time trials are brutal. Imagine the precision needed to gold the hardest license tests, but extended over 2 full laps with an absurdly fast car that's not like anything else in the game. The only saving grace is that you can cheese it slightly by using the tarmac runoff areas, as the game will only disqualify you if you put all 4 wheels onto the grass or gravel. Of the 3 time trials, the final one at Suzuka is known to be the toughest, in part because there's nowhere for you to extend the track. Beyond being insanely difficult, there really isn't much else to this event. It definitely makes sense for it to be the final special event in this game, but once the novelty of the X 2010 wears off, I don't really find it all that interesting. NASCAR debuted in the series with GT5, and so the Jeff Gordon NASCAR School was created as an introduction for players who might not have been familiar with the sport. Once again, it takes the form of 3 difficulty levels: beginner focusing on drafting, intermediate on the different racing lines, and advanced on scenarios that you're likely to encounter in a real race. Its purpose as an entry point into oval racing is pretty clear, and I think it delivers on that well. The main career does feature a handful of oval races, most notably the NASCAR Series Championship, and what you learn from these challenges can be put into practice with relative ease. Another reason why I think this event exists is also to partly justify NASCAR being in the game at all. In the same way that we've seen cameos from Sebastian Loeb and Sebastian Vettel, here we have 4-time NASCAR Cup champion Jeff Gordon to guide you through the event. It all helps to legitimize an aspect of the game that could potentially be overlooked by a number of players who don't really know what it's all about. I mean, we know that one of the reasons why NASCAR is in the game at all is because of its marketing value. It's the same reason why any of the car manufacturers or other racing series want to be featured. Anyway, despite this special event being very solid, serving a clear purpose and executing it well, I can't really justify ranking it any higher. At the end of the day, it is just an introduction into a wider aspect of the game, rather than its own self-contained thing. In my opinion, when I consider what makes a special event truly great, I'm looking more for the latter. Something that you can come back to enjoy on its own merits, not just to complete once and then never think about again. Ultimately, that's what the NASCAR School is and was always meant to be, so there's no shame in that. And you know what? For as much as Jeff Gordon's in-game model often gets memed about, with its uncanny stare and loose definition of facial animation, Sebastian Vettel's isn't exactly much better. If you ask me, they should have just done what they did with Sebastian Loeb and not even bother. From the NASCAR School, we now head over to the AMG Driving Academy. This event is similar to the previous one in the sense that it's about learning and honing your skills. But rather than that being for a specific style of racing, it's for a specific track, the fearsome Nürburgring Nordschleife. There are 4 levels to this event, and each of them feature 5 individual challenges. The track is broken up into 4 sections, and you have to complete each within the target time. The final challenge, however, takes the form of a full lap, including other Mercedes cars as slower traffic. I don't know about you, but I definitely get some Mission 34 vibes from it. If the premise for this event sounds familiar, that's because this is pretty much the progenitor of the Circuit Experience mode that would appear in GT Sport and now GT7, breaking the track down into smaller sections before trying to master the full thing, just minus the slower traffic. As I mentioned, there are 4 levels to this event, 2 with the Mercedes 300 SL and 2 with the Mercedes SLS. Each have a level in the dry and in the wet, encompassing a wide degree of driving scenarios. As such, by the end of this event, I don't think it's possible to not come out the other side as a better driver. Speaking from my own experience, I know that completing this event back when I first played through GT5 made me a lot more confident on the Nürburgring. I no longer felt a sense of dread whenever it appeared in an event. Just being forced to sit down and focus on driving it, and being rewarded handsomely to do so, was enough to give me the boost I needed. It can be easy to forget when you've been playing racing games for such a long time that everyone has to start from somewhere. The Nordschleife is not an easy track to remember. Visually, it all kind of blends into one. So, much like the NASCAR School, I think that making a special event dedicated to it was a very smart decision. Again, the fact that this event exists solely as a form of driver training does limit how high I can rank it, so 8th is as good as it was ever going to get. We're finally back on GT6 with the Goodwood Festival of Speed. We've talked about special events that were inspired by real things, and this is probably the best example. This event shares its name with the real-life Goodwood Festival of Speed, which takes place at the Goodwood Hill Climb every summer. In GT6, it takes the form of 5 sets of 3 time trials, 15 in total, using various cars. It's worth noting that almost every car used is either entirely new to GT6, like the KTM Crossbow and BMW 507, or an updated version of an existing car, like the Alpine A110 and Lancia Stratos. The only exception to this being the final time trial in the Red Bull X2010. There is a decent selection of cars to use, old and new, race cars, road cars, and rally cars, there's a bit of everything. My only disappointment with the event itself is that you're given generic target times, just like most other events. It would have been nice to have to beat times set by other cars on an actual leaderboard, just like the real-life event, even if you never see those cars yourself. Even still, you can always just create your own leaderboard by doing runs in time trial if you really want to. A nice detail with this special event is that, as you progress through the game, rather than just simply unlocking more challenges, you receive an invitation from Lord March, the owner of the Goodwood estate who founded the Festival of Speed. It's a small detail, but one that adds a nice touch of flavour. None of the time trials themselves are particularly hard, nothing really is in GT6, but the final one with the X2010 is definitely the toughest, especially on such a narrow course. As much as this event is a clear homage to the real Festival of Speed, I don't really relate it that much to the timed shootouts. The selection of cars, together with the lenient time limits, make me see this event as more of an opportunity to simply showcase these cars and enjoy driving them. And as much as I would love this event to be an all-out attack where you have to shave every millisecond you can, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's funny that the first special event in GT5 is actually one of my favourites from this game. The Gran Turismo karting experience is exactly what its name suggests it to be. Karts were yet another new addition to the series in GT5, and so it makes sense that they would be given their own special event, with 3 difficulty levels each containing 2 races. GT5 only features 1 kart, the Racing Kart 100, so I don't believe there was much scope to do more with them in the game. More karts would be added later on through DLC, and we would eventually see them feature in the main career mode of GT6, but with GT5 they only appear in this one event. The karts in this game have earned a reputation for being difficult to control, but that's mainly down to one key detail that doesn't get mentioned often enough. The karts only have rear brakes, which means you have to be careful when braking and turning. As long as you keep this in mind, I think they're pretty fun to drive, as you can even use this to your advantage. Another thing that I like about this event is how it makes use of the course maker by including a number of unique circuits. The Eiffel Kart and Tokyo Bay Kart themes are the ones used here, which makes a refreshing change of pace from the other events in the game. The only disappointment is that I wish they had included more races at other circuits too. There is one at Autumn Ring Mini, but I feel like they could have used the likes of Suzuka East, Tsukuba, or London as well. Of course, the loss of Piazza del Campo, a track that was seen in trailers and demos but was cut from the final game for licensing reasons, most likely didn't help. I can almost guarantee that it was planned to appear in this event. To be honest, I feel like the karts suffered slightly as a result of being overhyped prior to the game's release. Given how the game is structured, buying a used car and progressing from there, I don't think the karts were ever going to fit properly into the main career. Although there were some who were disappointed by the decision to restrict them to this one special event, I think it was the right choice. It gave them the spotlight they deserved without forcing them onto players who might not care and would just want to get straight into the cars. This is the Red Bull X Challenge in GT6. What makes this event an outlier in this ranking is that technically it isn't a special event. When it was first added in update 1.02, it was featured under the career mode tab instead. I don't really understand why, since it seems to fit the bill for a special event, so I'm choosing to just ignore that and include it anyway. This challenge takes the form of 4 separate levels. The first is the Red Bull Kart Masters, a 4-race championship using a special Red Bull version of the Racing Kart 125. It's decent, but doesn't stand out much from the other kart events in the main career. Then there's the X2014 Junior Championship, a 5-race event for the Red Bull X2014 Junior, and the X2014 Standard Championship, the same thing but for the X2014 Standard. These events serve to expand the Red Bull ecosystem beyond just the fan car. The X2014 Junior is like an entry-level single-seater, boasting around 250 horsepower, whereas the X2014 Standard is like the fan car, but with less power and without the fans. To tell the truth, the events for each of these cars are actually some of my favourites in the entire game. The AI is decent but not amazing, and every race features a grid start. Compared to most other races in this game, they're incredible. It's almost as if races where you can actually race your opponents are more enjoyable than just passing them in a procession. Who would have guessed? But the main act here is the fourth and final level, the Sebastian Vettel X Challenge, which returns from GT5. It functions in a pretty similar way to its predecessor, featuring 2-lap time trials over 3 different circuits, but now instead of following Vettel's ghost, you actually race with him on track. The car is the Red Bull X 2014, an updated version of the X 2010, but it still drives in pretty much the same way. However, the major difference is in terms of difficulty. This event is far easier than the one in GT5. Even on a standard controller, you can get gold without too much trouble. The steering delay is still a problem, but the target times are far more lenient to make up for that. This event is probably best known for its money-making potential. Of course, you earn the most credits from the Sebastian Vettel X Challenge, but the X 2014 Standard Championship is actually the best repeatable money-making method in the entire game. Thinking about it, the fact that 3 of the events here can be replayed for more credits is most likely why it's been put under the career mode rather than the special events. As such, considering that wouldn't be fair compared to the others, where rewards can only be earned once, but the fact that these races are so good is what really cements its ranking here. In my opinion, Gran Tour is a very interesting event. In one sense, it has a fairly basic premise, being 2 time trials and 3 races all strung together as one continuous special event. However, it's the theming that really sells it. It's all about how the game paints the picture that you're going on some epic road trip across Europe, a Gran Tour or Gran Turismo if you will. And there's a few ways in which it does this. Each of the events take place in locations across Switzerland and Italy, with your imaginary route between them being clearly marked. And then when you get to the next destination, there's a really neat cinematic showing your driver arriving at the location and switching over to the next car you'll be racing. The cherry on top is the fact that the 4 locations where these handovers take place are all photo mode locations, which you then unlock for completing each respective challenge. That said, we should probably talk about the challenges themselves. As I said, they're all fairly standard time trials and races. For me, the 2 most notable events are Part 1, which is a 1-lap time trial of Eiger Nordwand in an Alfa Romeo 8C, and Part 3, a point-to-point race on a Toscana coursemaker track in a Lamborghini Murcielago. In both cases, that's because these events are notorious for being quite difficult to get gold on. In the case of the Alfa 8C time trial, this is simply because the gold time is quite tough, but the Toscana race is more interesting. As this is a custom coursemaker track that you've never seen before, you're going to need some time to learn the layouts. What doesn't help with this is how the race transitions to nighttime, making it genuinely difficult to see in some places. For most players, you're going to need to take a few attempts to beat it, but when you can finally master the track, you should be able to pass the leading car with a couple of seconds to spare. All in all, this is a very solid special event that allows you to drive some interesting cars. It's nothing groundbreaking, but just a really cool idea for a themed event. Whenever I think about special events from GT5, Gran Tour is always one of the first that comes to my mind. It's definitely something that I would love to see them tackle again. We've seen a couple of special events in GT5 that make use of coursemaker locations, so what about an entire special event built around that idea? Well, that's where Gran Turismo Rally comes in. Breaking into my top 3, this event is the closest that the series has ever come to replicating the real-life discipline of rally. As usual, we have 3 difficulty levels, each containing 3 unique rallies: a gravel rally, snow rally, and tarmac rally. Each of these rallies take the form of multiple point-to-point stages, with your combined time for each determining your overall results. The stages themselves are all generated from coursemaker themes, meaning that no 2 rallies will have the same stages. As a premise, I absolutely adore this event. Naturally, you come up against faster cars as you progress, with the final advanced level requiring you to drive a purpose-built rally car. However, this event is far from perfect. Adding to the authenticity is the fact that you have a co-driver reading pace notes. But you have to wonder what the point of this is when you have a minimap positioned right in the middle of the screen. Also, a lot of the stages tend to be quite simple and featureless, particularly on the beginner and intermediate levels. It's quite clear that the coursemaker wasn't really designed for this, even if it is an interesting way to use it. Also, for whatever reason, the AI are noticeably slower on the snow rally, and unlike the Sebastian Loeb rally challenge, that's with SRF turned off, so I'm not sure what the deal is. Regardless, I still think that Gran Turismo Rally is a really neat idea that I just wish they expanded on further. More interesting stages, races, more features pulled from real-life Rally, and more opponents would have all been great improvements to see in future iterations. As it turned out, this is all we would ever get. Despite its flaws, Gran Turismo Rally stands out as something truly unique in this series, and I've always enjoyed my time with it. Naturally, I am slightly biased given that I love real-life Rally, and seeing it represented in a more authentic way in these games is something that I've always yearned for. Even still, I believe that these sorts of unique ideas is what the special events should always be about. Claiming the runner-up spot is the Ayrton Senna tribute from GT6. To be honest, I would feel kind of bad ranking it any lower given what it stands for. It's a tribute to one of the greatest racing drivers of all time, 20 years after his tragic death. But what exactly makes it so special? Well, first, let's talk about the content. This event takes the form of a series of time trials in some of the vehicles Senna drove throughout his career, starting with his 1980 DAP racing karts, then his 1983 British F3 machine, and finally the Lotus 97T that he would drive to his first Formula 1 victory in 1985. This special event also brought with it unique 1980s versions of Brands Hatch and Monza, where most of the time trials take place. Another thing that makes it so unique is how the challenges at these circuits have you trying to beat the times that Senna himself set at these tracks. Details like that really do add to the experience, and also make these time trials fairly tough. But what really ties everything together are the slideshows that you're shown prior to each stage of the event. These not only detail Senna's life and racing career, but also provide context to his achievements and the lap times you're aiming to beat. As someone who's very interested in motorsport history, I really appreciate the effort they put in here, and I do feel like it elevates the event beyond simply being a series of time trials. What's also a nice touch is how completing all 3 stages unlocks the Ayrton's Wish documentary. This is a short video going through Senna's life, death, and enduring legacy, directed by the same guy who did the Kaz documentary, in fact. If there's one thing that you can say about this special event compared to any other, is that it has a lot of heart. But not only that, because the content itself is really solid. The new vehicles it brings are all unique and interesting, and so too are the classic circuits. A series of time trials may not be the most original idea for a special event, as we've seen, but the way they frame it here is what makes this event so memorable. That said, it doesn't quite manage to claim my top spot. In my opinion, there is only one other special event that can possibly take that honour. If you've been watching my channel for long enough, then you probably saw this coming. The Sierra Time Rally is my favourite Gran Turismo special event. But before we dive into exactly why that is, let me first explain what it's all about. The Sierra Time Rally is similar to many arcade races in that it's a timed run where passing through checkpoints increases the amount of time you have remaining. The end goal is to complete one full lap of the circuit, but you're also given a score based on how much time you have left, with various multipliers for passing cars, getting airtime, and achieving high speeds. Doing these things increases your combo meter, but this can be broken by driving off track or having collisions. However, the main attraction of this event is the track itself, Circuito de la Sierra. This is one of my all-time favourite Gran Turismo circuits, and as it measures just under 17 miles long, completing a clean lap of it with slower traffic can make for quite a challenge. This makes it pretty much the perfect location for this type of event. The event itself contains 4 separate challenges, each of which being over one full lap, but using gradually faster cars. Each of the cars are equipped with various tuning parts, including nitrous, meaning that there's also an element of strategy in when and where to use it. In the final challenge with the Nismo GTR, wet weather is also a factor. For me, this event has all the traits needed to make it truly great. 1, it's a completely unique idea that had never been done in the series before. 2, it makes use of the content in a completely different way. And 3, it's just really damn fun. You can earn some really great rewards from it, but even without that incentive, I often find myself coming back to GT6 just to play it. The only thing I wish they had included was an unlimited mode where you could drive your own garage cars, maybe within certain performance point brackets. I feel like that would have added even more replayability to an event that already has a decent amount. Although the Sierra Time Rally would only appear in GT6, it would inspire other Time Rally style events in the more recent games, most notably the Music Rally mode in GT7. Even though that mode pales in comparison to the Sierra Time Rally, it's still nice to see its influence carrying through to current day. And there we are, a full ranking of every single special event from the PS3 era of Gran Turismo. If there are any trends we can see, an obvious one is that I think the special events gradually got better over time. Most of the ones from GT6 feature in the top half of my list. In fact, the top two, the Ayrton Senna Tribute and Sierra Time Rally, were the final two special events ever added to GT6 as DLC. Naturally, a question we have to ask is, what happened to special events after GT6? A feature that had such prominence in the PS3 games seemed to disappear strangely fast. Well, if we're defining a special event as a themed side activity separate from the main career, they didn't go away entirely. The Lewis Hamilton Time Trial Challenge DLC was released for GT Sport in November 2019. It contains 10 time trials where the goal is to beat Lewis Hamilton's own times and achieve the diamond rank. In fact, the only reason why I didn't include this on the list is because it was a paid DLC pack that's no longer available to purchase, compared to the special events from GT5 and 6, which are still freely accessible to anyone. The term special events was actually brought back in the Spec 2 update of GT7 in November 2023. However, now it just refers to the limited time race events that appear in the weekly challenges, most of which being one-make races. So special events as we knew them are pretty much dead. Ultimately, what I think they were was a reflection of the PS3 era of Gran Turismo itself. It was a time when Polyphony were willing to be a bit more experimental and adventurous, even if their ideas often weren't executed in the best ways. Still, I definitely prefer that over current day, where they don't seem willing to try as many new things, instead just doing the same things over and over again, like they're stuck in some sort of time loop. It's kinda sad. But we can always look back to GT5 and GT6 for a time when this series was able to be truly weird and interesting. If these games can't be inherently great, then I think that's the next best alternative. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments. How would you rank each of these events? But for now, thanks for watching and have a good one.